The 613 Commandments. Moses wrote the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, to record God's covenant with Israel and serve as Israel's national constitution. Later, God included the law of Moses as the basic legal code of the new covenant. For example, in Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 31 through 33, we read, "Behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not like the covenant which I made with their fathers in the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, although I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. But this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law, my Torah, within them, and on their heart I will write it, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people." In Mathew chapter 5, verses 17 through 20, Jesus said, "Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. Whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." Also, in Romans chapter 3, verses 28 through 31, Paul wrote, "For we maintain that a man is justified by faith, apart from works of the law, that is, the Torah. Or is God the God of Jews only? Is he not the God of Gentiles also? Yes, of Gentiles also, since indeed God, who will justify the circumcised by faith and the uncircumcised through faith, is one. Do we then nullify the law, the Torah, through faith? May it never be. On the contrary, we establish the law." Therefore, the Mosaic law is an important revelation of moral and spiritual truth that serves as a guide to proper living for God's people. Over the centuries, many people have tried to create a summary of Torah commandments. Maimonides created the most widely known list, but several others exist, and none of them agree. Some tried to group them by topic, while others listed them in canonical order. Any one of these lists is a useful summary of the Mosaic law, even if they are incomplete. Many tried to list exactly 613 commandments because of a silly rabbinical superstition about the symbolic meaning of numbers. But counting the commandments is a very arbitrary process, so it is impossible to determine the exact number. Theologians have tried to sort the 613 commandments into 3 general categories: civil, religious, and moral laws. This is a useful starting point for examining the Torah, even if Moses did not use these categories. The civil laws deal with the executive branch of government within Israel. In other words, laws for the king, the army, and the judges. God wanted Israel to be an example that the Gentile nations would admire and emulate. So the civil laws are an example of the laws that God wants all nations to follow. The church does not have the power to enact or to enforce the civil laws, but it can influence secular governments to create civil laws based on these godly principles. The religious laws spell out the duties of the Levites and the regulations for the sacrificial system. Theologians often assume that God abolished the religious laws, but this contradicts the teaching of Jesus and the apostles. In fact, the Bible clearly shows that God will restore the temple and the sacrificial system during the millennium. However, the temple does not exist today, so many of the religious laws are suspended at this time. The moral laws define right and wrong for the individual. God expected the Israelites and the resident aliens living in the land of Israel to obey the moral precepts, and the apostles taught Jewish and Gentile Christians to keep these laws when they wrote the New Testament. The fact that God incorporated the Mosaic law into the New Covenant usually raises certain questions. This typically involves laws regulating polygamy, levirate marriage, slavery, warfare, and the death penalty. The key for correct interpretation is to remember that God gave the Mosaic law to an Oriental culture during the Bronze Age. When we understand the reason for a specific commandment in its original context, the correct application for a modern culture is usually clear. The purpose of the following study is to examine the 613 commandments to see how they apply to Christians today.